From the headlines that move us
to the plays on the field and the people making a difference.
It's news, sports, stories, and the people that make our community come alive.
This is the Heartbeat of Tampa Bay.
I'm Christopher Ingram.
And I'm Sarina Fazan. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Sarina, we have like a former, you were in the news business.
Yes.
I was sort of in the news business at Bay News 9, and we've got a competitor here.
We sure do. Mike
Deeson.
In the house.
Hi
guys,
Mike.
it's good to see you.
You were 35 years
35 years at Channel 10. Yeah.
Wow.
And when you left, you were really the investigative reporter, and I used to love watching your stuff.
Thank you.
What are you doing these days?
Well, okay, I do a podcast once a week. We've done 351-hour shows since 2018. I write music as well. You know that.
Yeah.
So I have been taking my songs. I've been writing music since high school. And I am doing music videos with them. Once a week, I'm releasing a music video with AI, which I'm learning all about that. I'm promoting my book. I speak to foreign journalists through an organization that works with the State Department. And that's fascinating. They're amazed what we can say on the air here. Like I would play some of my stories and they'd say to me, if I did that in my home country, 1, I'd probably be fired. 2, I might be arrested. And 3, I might disappear.
Wow.
And they are not kidding, because I met a woman from Bangladesh who did a great story about the Bangladesh health ministry that didn't show up during the COVID crisis. They were supposed to be running COVID for the whole country. Nobody showed up for 6 months. She won all sorts of awards, and then she was arrested.
No.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I know it's true. I used to do work for the State Department over in far from places like Macedonia, and they used to tell me over there that the reason why they don't really have any free press, so to speak, is 1, all the media is controlled by the political parties, and 2, they have civil and criminal liabilities that they face. They can be fined up to $50,000. The average Macedonian makes like $6,000 a year, and you can go to jail for up to 2 years for things that we would consider like potentially slander or libels. But like going to jail, no thanks.
Absolutely.
So scary.
And the coolest thing was the State Department would send what they call instantaneous translators, because not everybody spoke English. So I would have a headphone and I would talk and he or she would translate to the group, and then they would ask me a question, and they obviously got what was going on because their questions were relevant. They'd ask me a question, and she'd translate immediately in my ear. It was the coolest thing, but it was a propaganda thing for the State Department to show that we have a free press and all of that. So doing that, and then the most important thing is I coach my grandson's little league team and pick him up from school every day.
That's
so
great.
That keeps me pretty busy.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, it's interesting though when you were talking about the State Department and the media across the world. We can take things for granted.
We do.
But
as bad as it is sometimes.
Yes, but it's gone a little too far, I think. Right? What do you think?
Well, yeah, let's talk about that, Mike. I want to hear your perspective. I'll share a little bit of mine. Maybe we'll squeeze something out of Sarina too. But tell us, what do you see in the political media landscape in the United States right now? Where would you say it is compared to, say, like 20 or 30 years ago?
Oh, it's a disaster. It is a disaster. Can I give some history?
Sure.
When I started, I had my first radio job in 1966. I'm older than dirt. And I had my first...
You look great.
Thank you. Good jeans, Bombay gin. And I had my first TV job in 1968. Anyhow, back then, the FCC only allowed a group to own 7 AMs, 7 FMs, and 7 TV stations. So the groups were more broadcaster oriented, and they wanted to be part of their communities and all, because it was small. When the FCC removed the limit on the amount of stations.
The FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, for folks that don't know.
And everything is based on the Federal Communications Act of 1934, as you taught in your classes. I'm sure I spoke at Chris's classes when he was there. But anyhow, they removed that, and then you got these huge conglomerates that Sarina worked for Scripps, a huge conglomerate. I worked for what became Tegna. It had been Gannett beforehand. And they owned several stations. And then there's going to be a push to merge Channel 8's ownership, Nexstar, with Tegna, which owns Channel 10. So in this market, that will be absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
It will take away voices. People will lose jobs at Channel 10. But you need and I feel bad for my friends there. But for the community, when you have less voices, that's very problematic. Also, when I came to Tampa Bay in 1982, there were 5 daily newspapers. There was the Tampa Tribune, the Tampa Times, the St. Petersburg Times, the Evening Independent, which was free the next day if there was no sunshine in St. Petersburg that day, and the Clearwater Sun. Now we have the St. Pete Times, or the Tampa Bay Times, which you only have 2 days of print editions out of that.
It's a joke.
So that's
paper's a
really, really problematic. So that's one of the problems, but also when the big corporations took over, instead of broadcasters in charge, I'm sure it was this way at Scripps, it certainly was at Tegna, you had the bean counters that were in charge, the people who were trying to make money for their stockholders and didn't really care about the community at all. They were off in Washington or wherever. They had no relationship to Tampa St. Pete or wherever else they owned stations. So that was one problem. Another thing that happened in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was president, he removed the Fairness Doctrine. So what was the Fairness Doctrine? Back when that was in effect, if, let's say on WFLA radio, which ran Rush Limbaugh when he was alive every day for 3 hours, when the Fairness Doctrine was in effect, so if Rush was on from 12 to 3, from 3 to 6, they would have to have some type of liberal counter programming that was there. When they removed that, it changed the whole landscape. So for radio in particular, which is part of the media, the news departments were squeezed out. They found they can make huge money, and it was mostly a conservative audience for some reason that was drawn to that more than a liberal audience. There are some liberal shows, but they don't make the same amount of money. So that changed the landscape as well, because if you're having a radio station that's all conservative, you want to slant your news. I don't think that's the right way to do it. It should be objective. But from the people running the stations, they want to slant their news.
Because that's what your listeners want to hear.
Because that's exactly what your listeners want to hear. So fortunately, on the local level, there hasn't been that same slant, but I'll get to the problems with local news in a second. But on the national level, there is such a slant, and with the advent of cable TV, it just gives us the conservative, like Fox is conservative, MS Now is liberal, obviously in the middle. You don't necessarily get news down the center.
It's all opinion.
The recent shooting of Renee Good is a perfect example of how fractured our country is when people, hundreds of people, can look at the same exact videos and come to completely opposite conclusions.
Well, we just talked about that.
Yeah, we were talking
about that.
And I have a thought about that as it relates to the media and like that tragedy. And it was tragic, right? I mean, regardless of what you think about her or about him, it was a tragedy. Someone lost their life that day. They woke up, he wasn't looking to shoot someone and she wasn't looking to get shot. But actions do have consequences, right? On both sides. I think that a lot of what happened there is that we have so many people in this country, and I will take the viewpoint of on the left that are so against our government under President Trump that they have almost been indoctrinated into thinking that people who are in federal law enforcement are members of the Gestapo and that they need to fight them because they're Nazis. I mean, we hear this rhetoric all the time.
And this is going to get us off, but with the way that the ICE patrols are working, that's turned even some Republicans. I have Republican friends.
Sure. There's fault on both sides.
I tend to lean liberal. I'll be the first to admit it. But
I want to know your thoughts on do you think that there is indoctrination going on, that people are in fact being and it could be on either side,
right? On both sides. Right. Watch Fox News.
Sure.
And they'll tell you watch MS Now, and they'll tell you the opposite.
We disagree on politics, but we agree on the solution here is we have to get back to having decent, fair, objective news coverage.
Absolutely.
And I think you and I both agree that with the exceptions of the Fox and the CNNs and the MS Now, but like the mainstream kind of traditional news media, the alphabet soup networks, they're terrible. They're all terrible.
But see, then you've got the new edition of Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss has come on now as the president of CBS News, who has got a right-wing slant and is trying to soften CBS's stance on that. And the owners of CBS now, David Ellison, who got his money through his father, Larry Ellison, are very right-wing. And they want to put a right-wing stamp on CBS News.
But how is that any different than all these other networks have traditionally had a left-wing stand?
Well, I think the cable networks more so than
NBC, CBS, ABC, up until this recent change in leadership in CBS, I think, as a conservative, that all of these alphabet soup networks have always been very left-wing, very left-leaning from the national standpoint, not necessarily at the local level. But from a national, so why do people like you get upset when now it's a conservative leading a network, but when it was liberals leading a network, you didn't have that problem?
But they tried to keep some air of objectivity. I think she's
trying isn't enough.
Well,
like they really need to be objective, not give this the appearance of objectivity.
She is going after to change CBS.
No, I think it was probably unnecessary. And having one out of the three being conservative versus the other two being liberal,
I would rather that they just tell the news just as. And let me explain why I think a lot of reporters tend to lean liberal. Now, I don't know if this is.
Here's what I want to say, just really quickly. Usually I do talk a lot, but as you've noticed, and as Christopher mentioned earlier, I like to be Switzerland. And, just maybe keep.
What does Switzerland think?
Well, for me, I mean, I honestly, and we talked about this too, and I've talked about this with you too, independently, Michael.
We're all friends. You got.
Oh yeah, we're all friends.
Yeah, we're all really.
We're gonna sing Kumbaya in a few minutes.
We were born, it's in our blood that we wanted to be journalists, right? I can honestly, it's not like, I want to be on TV, I want to be a journalist.
I always knew, right?
We, all three of us, I think we definitely can agree on that. What is so bothersome is when anchors, reporters, and what you guys have been talking about could give their opinions.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And that is and I do feel it was the cable stations that started it.
Absolutely.
100%, right?
However, let me say that, and I agree with you. And remember, and people have to remember this because they always say, well, why doesn't the FCC do something? FCC does not regulate cable.
Right.
That's a really good point.
That's
only
broadcast.
Only
broadcast, and that people don't understand.
No,
that.
they don't understand.
But I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Walter Cronkite, who spoke at my college graduation from the University of Missouri, and I graduated in 1970, which was the year of Kent State, and he spoke a lot about Kent State then. But he also had gone on the air, and he had gone to Vietnam and came back. And looked into the camera and said, Mr. President, we cannot win this war in Vietnam. Yeah. And when people say Cronkite was always so objective, not the case. That was.
Oh my God, that gave me so many.
But he was right. He was saying something nobody else would tell the president.
And Lyndon Johnson said, if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost America.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, he pretty much played it down the center. But it wasn't always like that. But that is a problem. Let's talk about local TV for a second. Local TV has gone through so many changes in terms of staffing that the cutback on staff is just abysmal. That there aren't enough people to go out and cover the news, and the news that's put on TV it just drives me crazy.
It's pathetic.
I'm one of those people that yells at the TV.
Yeah,
I can't help myself. Well, every time I see, and I advise anybody out there who is watching TV, when you see a reporter standing in front of crime tape doing a live shot, scream, lazy journalism. It is horrible journalism, but here's the reason why. Okay, let's talk about it. Say there is a murder in Pinellas Park. Horrible thing. Unless it is some unusual, the Senekers, the woman who killed who killed her high school kids. Now that's one that affected the whole community. And people felt about it, and that was a legitimate crime story. But most of the murders that you see affect the victim,
like 5
the
people.
perp, the
Immediate
family
family.
members,
Yeah.
and a 4-block radius.
Yeah.
We are a market, and there are a lot of markets like us, of 4 million people. Why are we wasting a minute and 45 or 2 minutes with a live shot in front of, you know why?
You know why?
Yeah,
because
it's
if
easy
it
to
bleeds,
film.
it leads, and,
It's-
and that's an
but
easy
it's-
story.
the
But
reason
doing
it-
the kind of real journalism that you used to do, any news director will tell you it costs money.
It costs money. Yeah, that's very true.
and
Because
standing there in front of the crime tape doesn't cost a dime.
I know, and you could have almost a monkey do it. I hate to-
Right, you could
know,
go to Lowry Park Zoo and drag one out and give him a microphone.
No, it's true. I mean, investigative journalism, which I loved, which I spent most of my career
Tell
in.
us about the process of that, because you spoke to that about investigative journalism at my classes at UT, and I don't think people really comprehend like what goes into that in terms of the initial investigation, the amount of time, the reviews, the lawyers, all that. Tell us a little bit about that, Mike.
Here's the way it worked at Channel 10, and I'm sure at all the other stations. We had a meeting every Monday with our investigative unit, and we would pitch stories to our producers, our news director, assistant news director, and they go, I love it, I hate it, yeah, I like it, but let's do it later on. So finally, when we get the story, and I'm going to go back to that in a sec, when we get the story, and you do all the research and put it all together, then I would write it and finish it and give it to our unit producer. He or she would look at it, maybe make some changes. Then it would go to our executive producer. He or she would make some changes, sometimes because of time, because I can, as I've proven here, can be verbose. But sometimes it was to cut down, but sometimes to stylize the story more. Then it would go to either our assistant news director or news director. After everybody signed off on it, we would be on a conference call with our Washington attorney, who would go line by line over the story and go, what do you have to back this up? What do you have to back that up? And sometimes he would say, and he was great because he had been a newspaper reporter before he went to law school. He would go, Mike, I don't know. We could get in trouble with this line. How could you live with, and he would help, could you live with if we said it like this? And I would go, yeah, sure. He said, I can defend that, don't worry. Because I was sued a ton of times. We won every suit on a summary judgment. That's where the judge says this case will not get a conviction and it's a waste of the court's time and the jury's time to go ahead. But when I would get that Federal Express envelope at home and at work
subpoena.
saying you're being sued, you get a sick feeling in your stomach. And you got, and it takes you away from your main job and your main work. Anyhow, one of my favorite stories was, I had a story that I pitched to the station in August one year. It was about an illegal investment in Hardy County that a local representative, Jamie Grant, got several $1 million.
Who doesn't represent Hardy County,
Who
by the
doesn't
way.
represent Hardy County. But there wasn't a legislator down there who's now president of the Senate that was involved with it, along with his brother. But that's beside the point. So I'm pitching it in August on a Monday meeting, and I go, oh, Deeson, Hardy County. What? I said, but that's a local legislator. And I said, yeah, we don't like it. I pitched it every Monday and worked on it because I set my own schedule as an investigator. I just, there were times I said, you have to have a story done by then.
Right.
As long as the story's done, they don't care where I work. So every time I worked on that story, it was a 3-hour commitment. Hour and a half down, hour and a half up.
Right.
Okay, I worked on that and pitched that every single Monday. And they go, no. Finally, it runs in April the next year. I beat them down finally. They said, okay, decent, go. It won all sorts of awards. I won an Emmy for it. It became a statewide story. But my people couldn't see it, and I was screaming like a crazy
And
person.
it was a really good story. It was complicated, but you really simplified it. And then
thanks.
you had the amazing visual. Tell us about the cards, the deck of cards.
Here was the deal. Thank you. Thanks for remembering that. The problem was, and I understood what my people were saying, except for Jamie Grant, who was local, nobody knew who the people in Hardy County were and who was involved.
Because they're not in our market.
They're not, yeah. And they said, how am I going to show who these people are? I couldn't think of it. And when I was doing a story, I was eat up with it. I was thinking about it all the time.
Right.
And in the middle of the night, I woke up, I went playing cards.
Poor way.
And so Oh, she's got insomnia. She's probably watching some TV show in the other room. Anyway, I put the pictures of the people in Hardy County on the playing cards, and that's the way I
visual, like the cards being dealt out.
Being dealt out.
It was really cool.
But anyway, to do something like that, it cost a lot of money because, first of all, you don't want to put a rookie in an investigative reporter job. I mean,
Absolutely.
because
you need the experience.
You need the experience. You know, it's the best job in broadcasting. It's the hardest job. I worked my butt off, but I loved it. I never worked a day in my life. I mean, really, I couldn't wait to get into the station. But anyway, so they pay the investigative reporters more money. Hallelujah. That's why my retirement is very good. Thank you very much, Channel 10. No, but they do that, and they need experienced people, and you're not on the air every night. So they go, well, geez, we're paying Deeson all this money, and we want to have him on the air. Why, and he's working. So I had to do a lot of stories at the same, but the stations have cut back on that. And then they are, when I came to this market, you could not be hired in this market from Fort Myers. Fort Myers is a decent-sized market, but it wasn't big enough for
to move up here.
To move up here,
there was something in between.
Something in between that they had to go to if they wanted to get here. Now they're coming from Moline, Illinois, or wherever,
or even out of college sometimes.
Out of college
sometimes, but that's because too the advent of the phone and taking video. I mean, anybody can be on camera, and
that is, Sarina, that is such a problem because, and with the advent of social media, is that anybody can be a reporter, they don't go through 5 layers like I did, and they put out false stuff. For example, let's go to Renee Good again. There is a meme on Facebook, and I think I saw a couple other places, showing her arrest record and all the horrible things that she had done in her life. Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true.
But we were talking about this the other day. People will forward that without looking at it, without checking it. Hey, wait, scratch your head. And that's what we as journalists do. We say, wait a minute, let's double check this.
If I see something on Facebook that I go, wow, the first thing I do is start putting out my investigative report.
Ask questions. Ask questions, folks. That's what you need to do is ask questions.
Yes.
That's what journalists do.
That's what journalists do. And don't believe I see, when I first got in the business, and I'm sure it's true with everybody, being on the air was, oh, look at me, I'm on TV. By the time I finished, the thrill, I mean, I like being on air. That was fine. But the thrill for me was going through the paperwork and finding, that nugget.
Yes.
Now, on the other hand, the worst thing in the world was be working on a story that my folks are all excited about, and this is going to be great, and then it blows up. You find the piece of paperwork that says what that guy was saying was true, and it wasn't.
It just kills the story.
You've got to.
And then you walk away, because that's the right thing to do.
You hate telling your boss. That's why I always had so many stories in the hopper at the same time, because like some days I'd shoot on 5 different stories because you never know when it's going to blow up. But I have seen people try to force a story on the air that isn't there. But go ahead.
No, finish up.
Oh no, but and that's the problem. But like you say, they're hiring the kids. You're hiring the people they're doing the Facebook things, and they don't have the experience. To me, I would think, okay, TV stations all the time are doing their promos about spot news. We're the first with breaking news.
On your side.
That's not where you win when there is a spot news story. Everybody is there. That's not where you win the viewers.
Right.
To me, you win the viewers with investigative pieces
yourself.
that people have to want to watch, that they have to see it, and we're missing that in local TV. And there's a fear also with some stations now of irritating advertisers. I never had that problem. I was lucky, but I have heard stories being killed because it's a major advertiser.
Right, and that is very disturbing. Like,
it is.
Yeah, it is. That's a line.
Yeah, that is definitely a line.
The first news director I had at Channel 10, Bud Falder, I don't think he's alive anymore, would not allow the salespeople into the newsroom. And one day there was a guy, a friend of mine, who ran the station softball team, and he was at my desk. He says, we're going to play at 6 o'clock tonight, not at 7. Can you be there? And Bud comes running out of his office. What are you doing here talking to one of my reporters. You can't. So we're talking softball, bud. But he was really, really good about that.
What would your advice be to a young college student who's majoring in journalism today?
I would say what you have to do is broaden your scope and learn as much as you can about every other subject, including journalism. You need to have a strong. Now, I'm prejudiced because I went to the University of Missouri, and they wouldn't let us have. They wouldn't let us have a minor because they wanted. We had to have so many hours in poli-sci. We had to have 2 economic courses, and they said, because you're going to be writing stories about money, you're going to be writing stories about politics. I would immerse myself as much as possible. I would read as much as possible. Read newspapers. Watch a bunch of different TV, but learn how to do research. And learn how to deal with people. Journalism is still a people business. You can't just do it on the phone. The photographer I always used to work with, Paul Thorson, Paul, if we had to pick up something late at the county building, like a piece of paper or a DVD or something like that, he would pull up and he'd say, okay, we're on deadline. Promise me you won't talk to anybody. Just go get that, because I talk to everybody. Right. But it is a relationship business where people have to trust you. And what also hurts local TV is people come and go so quickly in this market that they don't have time to establish those personal relationships. And that's part of it. And because the stations aren't paying anything to the reporters, so they can't stay. Right. It's hard to make a living in journalism these days. Right. I was lucky. I lived in the golden age of local TV. That has come and gone. That wagon pulled out of town a long time ago.
Not coming back.
Yeah.
No. Well, hopefully, maybe there's a lot of catch up to do. It's not coming back the way it was, for sure. But maybe it will get to the point where
we get a little better than we are today.
Yes.
Let's hope.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, tell us, where can people find more about what you're doing, all the cool things that you've done? I know documentaries, your music, you're doing some independent journalism on the side, but where can we follow you?
Okay, MikeDeeson.com. Let me also put a plug for my book.
Absolutely.
Bad news for you is good news for me.
I read it. You signed it. It's a good book. It's got some good stories in there about Tampa and the media here.
A lot of stories about the media, but I have been blessed. I really have been blessed in my life with a great career, wonderful friends. My media friends are some of my favorite people because we spend a lot of time out on the street together and just waiting for a news conference. And I would just hope people would look at TV and social media, which has changed. That's a whole other show you could do. Askance. Don't, because they say it, and if it sounds outrageous, look it up.
Right.
It probably is.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
We always say follow the facts.
That's right.
Follow the facts.
Good words of wisdom. Thanks for being here, Mike.
It was a delight.
Every story shared
adds another heartbeat to Tampa Bay.
From courage to community.
We are so proud to tell the stories that keep our neighborhood strong.
Thanks for watching The Heartbeat of Tampa Bay. Appreciate you being here, Mike.